Welcome everybody, and thank you for joining this joint MRS and PA Consulting Business of Evidence webinar. My name's Gemma Proctor, I'm a partner and I lead our Human Insight team here at PA. I want to start today's webinar by saying that partnering with the MRS on this report has been a real privilege for us here at PA, especially in joining them in celebrating the milestone 80th anniversary year. It's given us a real chance to take a step back and have a clear look at our sector together. And what has really stood out the most is just how essential research, insight and evidence is to the UK's economic and strategic decision making. It's really actively shaping the future of organisations, of policy, of markets and the UK economy. And we've now got real concrete proof of this. But what we do appreciate and acknowledge is that for many of us at the moment, the future isn't necessarily that straightforward. It's uncertain and maybe unsettling in places. But what this report and the surrounding debate enables us to do is have that conversation, consider the shifting landscape and really do come together as an industry, as a sector to pave the way forward. And we hope that you leave the next hour feeling somewhat inspired and with a clear view on what could happen next and what your role could be in leading that. So if we move on to the next slide, please, Rob. We've brought together today a brilliant mix of voices from across our industry. So client side, consultancies, tech, and of course the MRS. And because having that mix of voices really does matter, this isn't a single player story. We're all responsible for celebrating, for shaping what's to come. So first up today, we're going to hear from Jane Frost, the CEO of the MRS, who's going to introduce the study and talk about the market size and why we have seen such growth over the last 10 years. And then my brilliant colleagues from PA, Rob and Riva, are going to run you through the report in greater detail. Rob and Riva are very much the brains and the power behind this research. And I know they're both incredibly proud of this study and they're really eager to share it with you today. And then I'm going to introduce and host our esteemed panel today, where we'll debate some of the most important topics that are coming out of the report and that we're facing today together as an industry. And if all goes to plan, then we're hoping to have 10 minutes spare at the end for a Q&A. So please do take the opportunity to ask any questions to any of the people that are presenting here today. If you do have questions, rather than use the chat, please use the Q&A facility that should be at the bottom of your screen. Okay, next slide, please, Rob. I'm hoping that those of you who have joined the call today and have an interest in this report have maybe read or at least seen the Business of Evidence report, so are somewhat familiar with it. The Business of Evidence report was last run 10 years ago, back in 2016. And Jane and Deborah and the MRS came to us last summer looking to update and refresh it. Obviously, a lot has changed over the last decade, but really this was and is an important opportunity to come together in 2026, the 80th anniversary of the MRS, and really show the impact and influence that we all together have. So obviously, this is in part a research report, so a quick nod to the approach and the methodology. It's not a report just purely based on opinion, it's based on evidence, and it's built on 3 pillars. So we ran in-depth stakeholder interviews with a variety of leaders across the industry, representing both private, public sector, industry, supplier and buyer side. We ran a survey of over 300 MRS members, and we also conducted a big piece of economic modelling where we lent on our sister capability here at PA. So that modelling work draws on a broader, more holistic definition of the sector than what we've seen before. We integrated the economic analysis with the survey data and the stakeholder interviews, and also some desk-based research that Rob and Riva carried out up front. And what it does is it captures the full breadth of organisations that now generate research and evidence. So from traditional providers to data analytics, to AI, charities, higher education, and the wider public sector. The report provides a much more comprehensive view of a market's true scale for the first time. So what you're going to see today is triangulated, it's robust, and it's representative of the market as it stands. And for those that I'm sure on the call that want to go even deeper, you can see the QR code at the bottom of the screen there. That will take you directly through to the report. And there are several pages on the methodology, on the economic modelling that you can go through at your own time. So I think with that, I'm going to hand over to Jane now to introduce the key headline findings of the report.
Thank you very much, Gemma. You know, one thing that everyone always tells me and everyone at MRS is we need to make more impact, and the sector as a whole needs to be heard more. In order to do that, we need two things, as you well know from your daily papers or your daily feeds in your computers. You need either stories or you need numbers, and preferably both. And what this report gave us was a very big number. 18.7 billion as a market value for our sector, defined widely. It includes client side, of course, but it's an important number because it actually makes us significant to government and to other stakeholders. It means that we are part and a key part of their industrial strategy, both through creative industries and through professional business services, which are two of their priorities. Government, however much they say may want to help you, actually want to help the bigger ones first. They're not interested in the minnows. We need to show people that at scale, we are important to the UK. And this is what this number shows. It also shows that since the first time that we did this report back 10 years ago, we have shown growth in this business. It's a like-for-like comparison. And because all of you out there know that I like my analogies, and I hope you like the comparisons I use, this makes us at this size 3.5 times the size of sliced bread, which I understand is the last thing everyone said was the most incredible invention anyone made. But the other interesting thing about these numbers is that by defining us broadly, we can see what footprint there is to go after. It is a definition that actually takes in everybody who is using evidence. And instead of looking at us just from our traditional channels, it says, right, where might we go? And that's important because as you all know, we've run through three major waves of change where everyone was predicting either the death of the core sector or the radical change of the core sector. The first one was DIY. The second one was the big data boom. And the current one is obviously AI. But the first of those two, I did hear death, destruction, and damnation all around every time everyone looked at them. But we survived and grew because we absorbed and adapted and developed. And I think that's a strong message for us going forward, particularly in the current AI revolution, if you like. But I also would like to make the point that AI is, as AI does, it's a large language model base. We've been doing them for years, back even before MRS was founded. So it's nothing new to us, and we probably should be looking at more aggressively adapting rather than shrinking back. And I'm sure everyone who's listening to us is in that space. Can we have the next slide, please? And we are an important international sector. And the growth of business done outside the UK from the UK is also significant to government, because government actually is obsessed by, as you might expect, export income as well. But the other thing that is important to us, it means that you don't have to relocate overseas to be able to be an international player. You can do that from a centre in the UK that has recognised worldwide credentials, recognised worldwide authority. And I think that makes us it gives us another major opportunity going forward. Some of this is based on the strength and authority of what we've done over the years, and we shouldn't write that off. It's really important. So with that, and to go into more details, I'm going to hand you over to Robert.
Many thanks, Jane. Much appreciated. Yeah, so I think the first thing I'd like to discuss is really about the impact that the market, that research and evidence has had throughout, and I think this idea that over the last decade we've been, as a market, really confidently guiding organisations of various shapes and sizes. Throughout these kind of choppy waters, it goes without saying there's been a lot of change. We've already referenced quite a few of these in the meantime, and from the research itself, we found that 9 in 10 agreed that research findings really are an important part of strategic inputs, driving key decisions and policy decisions as well. And that covers things from forecasting to key KPIs to different product strategies, policy strategies. Insight is really becoming, or has become, even more embedded across organizations. And it's a really interesting shift actually throughout this past decade, in that hopefully we're less of a sort of support function, and now we're really part of that decision engine more broadly, and kind of having that capability to have that impact because of the way in which we've kind of showed up and always been there to sort of help these organizations through. And so with that said, though, we really are at a particular inflection point at the moment. And, Gemma mentioned it in her intro that, we are at this very interesting point of uncertainty at the moment. We from the survey data, we see that about 8 in 10, believe ever tightening client budgets, cost pressures, commoditization of approaches, things like that are going to become some of the really significant challenges that the industry will face over the next 10 years. And around 7 in 10 saying things like job displacement as well due to AI and automation. So, there has been a lot of significant change over the last 10 years. We are currently going through a really significant change at the moment. And so I think we are, within our, requirements to actually explore what this means for us and actually really understand, where we go from here. So we've got growth on this one side, which has been really, really great to see, and really pleased to see that impact that we're having. But we're still under this massive pressure that's kind of potentially facing us as we move forward. And so really the question then becomes, what next? And I think part of the positioning of the report itself is really around taking those opportunities and really leading to define what comes next. And I think part of the report was really about identifying 4 key themes. So I think the first one of these is about becoming the AI trailblazers. So it's all well and good, like trying to kind of keep pace and things like that, but it's really about stepping in front of it and actually getting ahead and leading the way. Investing now for future talent later. This is a really important one, and we'll come to that more in detail shortly. But that's really around, our talent is our lifeblood. We need to make sure we're maintaining the constant, a consistent and kind of constant stream of juniors who come through the ranks and become the leaders of tomorrow. Leading with confidence. I think, as an industry, there's a sense that perhaps we don't always shout about our successes or our impact as loudly as we probably should do. So I think this is about just shifting our mindset slightly and thinking about ways in which we can lead, whether it's through programs or whether it's through the impact that we're doing or the organizations we're working with. And then finally, this idea of moving forward together is a really crucial one. And I think something that, given the fragmentation over the last how many years, lots of changes going on internally, client side, smaller operators perhaps having some struggles. I think the really important thing here is how we together as an industry face this, and we collaborate and we think about ways to move forward as a wider community. So the first one of these is really about, championing the AI agenda. And I think that really important thing is, obviously everyone's talking about it, massive opportunity at the moment. 8 in 10 have said they've already adopted or plan on adopting AI in the research and evidence activities. So, it's already a big thing. And I think this is really about not just simply playing catch up and lip service to certain things, but really about helping define what different organizations' AI programs could look like, how we get in front to, create frameworks and guardrails that can then be shared more widely across organizations, really being that insight professional in the loop. So making sure that we are, being the champion of AI internally, I think is a really important thing here. And I really like this quote that's on this slide here. And I think it's the idea that, AI isn't the threat. It's actually the people or the person that knows how to use it best will be the ones to take your job. And I think that's a really interesting way of thinking about it. It's not necessarily the tool that will take the job. It's actually the people that are taking advantage of that and leading from the front, are the ones who are going to be have a massive advantage moving forward. The next one in this one was about investing now for future talent later, and we saw from the earlier on in the report, if you read the full version, our talent really is something really, really vital. It's what keeps us going at the end of the day. And I think the real crucial thing here is that we have to have we have a real responsibility to cultivate and nurture the diversity of our junior talent, and making sure that we are focused on that now in order to, really have dividends in future. And I think the things that will become even more important to the future of the sector are things around strength of talent, the diversity of thinking, inclusivity aspects. And I think this really leads nicely into some of the latter topics we'll talk through around, in terms of things like our ability for critical thinking or usage of different tools and platforms to get the most from them and things like that. But I think it's stood us in great stead for the last decade. It was one of the kind of big features, one of the top themes as to why we've done so well as an industry. And I think it is even more increasingly going to be important given the rise of AI and what that means for the sector. But presently perhaps it isn't seen as much of an important thing for different organizations to really focus on. So I think it's just thinking about how we continue to do that now to make sure that we actually push forward and, really kind of cover off that capability gap that could happen if we don't do this now. I'm going to pass to Riva to talk us through the last couple of these points. So over to you, Riva.
Yeah. And thank you, Rob. Thinking about what we heard consistently from industry leaders, we've been here before. Self-serve platforms, the rise of big data, and now AI. In each of these moments, there were real questions and anxieties about what it meant for the future of research and evidence. But we persevered, we found our way, and we evolved. And each time it opened the door for new opportunities. It's the same now. We will evolve and find our way, as we have done so before. It's the next quote. But what's different this time is the call to action, to be bolder, to go beyond keeping pace. Our comfort zone has often been finding the story, finding the insight, rather than telling it. In this AI world, that has to change. We have to lead and we have to tell the story. We need to be much more confident, much bolder about the amazing impact we make, owning the narrative and showing how we make a difference. And then next slide. But leading with confidence only gets us so far if we're not moving forward together. What this research has made clear is that the market needs a shared future vision, one that everyone can rally behind. Research buyers and suppliers are under mounting pressures, as we've talked. Budgets are tighter and technology is evolving faster than ever. These challenges risk pulling us in different directions, and the way through that is unity and collaboration. That means fostering a genuine spirit of partnership between buyers and suppliers, protecting and championing the standards that have made our research and evidence world-class, and embracing innovation while upholding the quality and rigor that sets us apart. An industry that complements each other rather than fights against each other. So I'll now hand over to Gemma, who will kick off the panel discussion where we'll unpack this further.
Thank you, Rob and Riva. I think there's some really important messages in there, particularly around leading through the AI era and this kind of uncertainty that we're going through at the moment. I think what the role of the future insight practitioner is. And then, we heard it really strongly from Riva at the end there. How do we as an industry, when there's all of these kind of competing tensions taking place, how do we move forward together and present that united front? So with that in mind, we're going to move on now to the panel discussions and take some of these key themes with us into that. Hopefully my panel will be appearing on screen now. I can't quite see them, but hopefully they'll pop up. And I'm going to give you a very quick intro into each of our panel members today. I've already said to them if any of this is incorrect, then they need to both blame AI and also maybe update their LinkedIn profiles. But without any further ado, I will firstly introduce James Sallows, who is the Global Head of Marketing Effectiveness at Lego, where he is spearheading a game-changing approach to directly drive business growth through the application of insights. He has extensive experience in the insights space, having worked in fieldwork, full service insights, media agency insights, and then for the past 7 years within brands. His career has had a particular focus on people development and advancing the role of insights as a business growth catalyst. In recent years, he has launched a transformational marketing mix modeling program, an insights academy, a new innovation approach centered on insights, a mini MBA in insights in partnership with UCL, and a hot housing career development program for insights high performers. Next up, I'd love to introduce Namita, who is currently Global Head of Consumer Marketing Insights for Deos at Unilever, a globally recognised insight leader shaping growth across beauty, food and wider CPG categories. A pioneer in the application of AI to insight and marketing, Namita has led the transformation of traditional research approaches into fully AI-enabled ecosystems. She introduced advanced AI-driven data pipelines that delivered 85 million euros in savings, whilst fundamentally reimagining the research funnel into a 100% AI-powered model. Her work sits at the forefront of the industry, particularly in the adoption of Gen AI to drive faster, smarter, and more predictive consumer insight. And then last but no means least, James Turner, or JT as he is better known, is a business leader in insights and analytics and founder and CEO of Delineate, a self-proclaimed research revolutionary. He is passionate about the power of data and insight to inform better marketing strategies and putting research data where it belongs in the 21st century. He also lectures on research techniques and is a regular industry speaker. Before founding Delineate, he worked for more than 25 years in senior agency and client-side research and insight, including senior roles at Black Swan Data, and was European COO at Edelman Berland, and prior to that, BT, ICM, Fresh Minds, and IRI. Wow, I feel a little bit like an imposter leading on this today. Thank you all for being here. One thing, reading your bios earlier today, and I noted that you all have in common, or the kind of shared experiences or traits that you all have, is how you've all led structural changes in how insight operates and really made it core to the commercial decision making and growth within your respective organizations. So I'm going to go into my first question now. So thinking about that and where you've all come from and thinking about leading through this era of AI, as an industry, as we've just heard from Jane and from Rob and Riva, we've been here before. We've navigated these periods of change successfully in the past, whether it's been self-serve or big data. So how can the industry navigate this shift with confidence, moving beyond simply just responding to AI and instead really kind of pave and lead the way? Namita, I'm going to throw this one over to you first, if that's okay.
Sure, absolutely. So, it's a very interesting question because AI has given us more information, faster information, better structured information than any other time in history. But to me, that is why the distinction between information or data and insight is becoming more and more clear every day, because people are drowning in pure information, pure data. And it's like the insights are the diamond in the coal mine. And that is why it is even more differentiated than it was. And therefore, I would argue that AI is actually a once in a lifetime opportunity for us to elevate us, to liberate us, to do what we really love as insights professionals, which is the guidance of decisions, which is to influence decisions, which is to be an integral part of driving and leading the change in the organization, if, of course, we allow it to do so. And then the only caveat really is that to use that opportunity, the relationship we build with AI as individuals and as organizations needs to be very intentional. And that's kind of, where my head is at. It needs to be very, very clear who's the boss, and the boss, as always, is the consumer. And then what we do needs to elevate that proposition, and it needs to liberate us from probably the bits that were holding us back. So to me, it's transformational in a very good way. It's very exciting, and I think that, my perspective is that AI needs to be at the center of a human-centric ecosystem. The consumer has to be at the center of that ecosystem. It can amplify things, it can scale things, but you need the core diamond in the center that sort of shapes and guides judgment and decisions. And then it needs to be augmented by all of our other specialist disciplines. Just like AI uses RAG models, we really need to augment AI with the work and the insights and the knowledge and the super specialities that we have to make it more valuable. And then, of course, I think there is a role for us to think about the fact that the bit that most organizations actually spend a lot of time in is structuring, governance, oversight, use case suitability, resolving integrative friction. Now, these are all huge pain points, and this is the stuff that, is kind of playing right up our alley. So I would argue that it makes insights as a profession more valuable, more precious, and, it's really about being intentional about the relationship with AI. So that's kind of my take.
Thank you, Namita. I'm going to throw this over to JT now, and what do you think around this? How do you echo what Namita has just been talking about, or do you have a different point of view?
I agree with most of what Namita has said. I think having two large organizations on the phone showing my age now, on the is really interesting, because we see the cutting edge use cases from large organizations like Unilever and Lego. I'm lucky enough to work with larger businesses and mid-size insight companies as well, and there's a real spectrum of engagement, understanding, and use of these tools. And it's right that we have the panel here, excluding myself, today to talk about these things. Most organizations need the leadership. They look to, and this is, I'm not trying to be to praise MRS too much here, but we need the governing bodies and partnership between clients and suppliers to set the agenda. And I think there's the tail of insight-sized teams, capabilities in the industry, not just in the UK, but beyond, that look for this guidance. So fabulous to have this conversation today, but we must not lose sight of the fact that there is a large number of people that are still very much just starting their journey, still getting those basic tools, being allowed to use those tools inside businesses. We're seeing one person insight teams still having to do everything, and that's either terrifying or frankly a godsend to these individuals. They've now got the ability to do loads more with the finite hours in the week. So I agree with Namita, it's a fantastic opportunity. I think we need exploration around where humans and AI interplay. I think in a corporate environment with lots of support from central teams, doing lots of the hard work around the edges. It's one way of doing things, and then there's a lot of other approaches as well. But I come back to industry standards, the membership organizations that, like the MRS, that help us come up with those ways of working, the case studies, the education, the sharing. And I really think it's important that we just keep this conversation going. I totally agree it's an opportunity. And I also agree with the earlier conversation and the examples in the report, that this is not new. We've been riding the change of technology in our industry since we went from pen and paper to telephone to CATI to online, and there's many waves of change, each time having pros and cons, but overall pros for us as an industry. And so I'm very excited personally.
Great, thank you, JT. And then James, what are your thoughts on this question?
I don't want to repeat anything we've been past. I think the only thing I would add is, when changes like this come, there is a real tendency for a large proportion of people, I think you're probably being a bit generous, JT, a large proportion of people just bury their heads in the sand to a degree and kind of see what's going to happen. I was an online panel seller back in the days when no one wanted to listen to us. No one thought we were ever going to be a threat, and no one thought the industry was ever going to change. And this feels a bit like that in that sense. And so my real ask is that we need to be much more on the front foot here. This isn't, this is just there and it's happening, and you can ignore it. You can throw out methodological concerns and all of these things, but you've also got to embrace the fact that regardless of all of that, it's coming. There are things that need to change. There are things that need to improve, but regardless, it's coming. Even just the cost benefit equation means it's coming. There's both a carrot and a stick for AI within businesses. You can get better, but you can also save a lot of money. So from both angles, it's kind of inevitable. What I think the focus has to be on is just simply how do we more proactively and more quickly define our sweet spot? How do we define how we integrate it? And how do we show that it's actually part of what we do, not an alternative to what we do? And I'd really focus on that because it's a big step forwards. It requires embracing it rather than holding it at arm's length. And as I said, I think there's a lot of people across the industry who need to make that step. And
if you don't mind me asking, James, what do you think holds us back from doing that?
I think it's fear. It's fear of what will change. It's also fear of being the first to either get it wrong or do it right. A lot of businesses don't want to take those risks, and both JT and Namita mentioned how things are being adopted in businesses. Risk averse businesses will be last movers on this for multiple reasons. So I think there's lots of elements of that, but also we've spent a lot of time selling tech and platforms as a vast majority of what happens in this sector. If AI comes in and removes or changes a lot of that, we need to go back to redefining ourselves as to what we actually deliver. Because what we deliver isn't data or platforms or tech. What we deliver is insight. And I do think the industry has kind of lost its way on that piece, where we've been defining ourselves by the technological and data changes, as opposed to defining ourselves by the insight value. And I think that is where some of the fear is, because that's quite a big shift across the industry.
I have a point to add on that, and I agree with James is saying there, and I probably am being a bit generous, James. You're right, probably. There are a whole lot of people that are just ignoring this. And Amita touched on this. There is that hierarchy of data, information, insight, knowledge, wisdom.
Yeah.
And I agree that we all aspire to help our clients or to help ourselves with supplier help generate those killer insights that transform what we do. There's also an enormous amount of more everyday information that we provide in businesses, and it's risk mitigation, it's guardrails, it's providing evidence. I love the evidence word. Again, not just because Jane's on the call. There's, it's a great word. It's the validation that we're making the right decision. And what we know of LLMs and AI, or they love to give you an answer. They'll always give you an answer. They're probabilistic. They're not deterministic. They don't say, I don't know, sorry. They'll always give you something that looks right, which is really dangerous because you can always fill it in quicker, as you say, James. So there's this enormous amount of education and, as you say, refining of our role to say that doesn't look right. It's leaning on methodology more. It's learning how to use that AI as a methodology in its own right and elevating it. You won't fight it, so deal with it and use it as a tailwind rather than a headwind, and find a way to control it. I think it's fascinating from that perspective. A final point. I was lucky enough to work at Edelman as digital was hitting, so the world's largest communications business. Richard Edelman, the founder of that business, told us every company is now a media company. They all own their own social assets, their own websites. I think every company is now a technology company. Right? We've been reversing it from a research company into being a technology business over the last 5 years. I think if you're not using it, you're not going to be around. It's becoming the basics of any agency. Whatever your discipline, you're going to have to know how to use it. It's a massive change. Statement, Gemma, sorry.
No, thank you. No, it was, really interesting. Thank you. I think some of what you've just said there, JT, leads me on to my next question, which is around our people, the great people that we have within our sector, within the industry. And the strength of our sector is always really rested on the caliber of these people, of also our craft, our skills, and like you just pointed out, the standards that we have. James, I'm going to hand this one over to you first, because as somebody, as I noted in your bio, that is very focused on career development of people within the industry with your mini MBA and Insights Academy. So as AI reshapes roles and automates tasks, make things more efficient, how do we continue to cultivate that next generation of insight practitioners?
Yeah, I think it builds on some things I was just saying on my previous answer, which is we've got to redefine ourselves, because a lot of the work that we do, and I think about within business where I was previously in this business, insight had been defined as the positive side of insight is that we're data driven. And I have always rejected that term. I think it's one of the worst things we've ever said about ourselves. Because, and actually I was on a call with a senior colleague just now and he came out with the comment of, I can buy data, what I can't buy is expertise. And I think this has caused structural and image problems and career development problems and scope of role problems across the sector, because we have defined our role too narrowly. And the problem is that's territory that's difficult to regain. So for our people to really succeed, we have to not only build up our people, but on the counter side of this, we've also got to build up the business understanding of what insights can deliver. So one of the things that I was doing when I was in Halion, when we launched this mini MBA, was actually not to target at insights people at all. It was targeted at educating everybody else on what we do. And we had hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of marketers who took the mini MBA to up their own understanding of how to open the door for insights to come in. Because you can't, bang on that door saying, hey, insights is great, if there isn't someone on the other side listening to you. And one of the great things within the Lego group that we've managed to do over the last couple of years is to really open up the skills that I think we need to develop, which is business partnership, business understanding, and how can you really come into a meeting with something that your stakeholder wants, not with a number. And for me, they're the skills that we need to develop. We need to focus in on exactly that. And I would say there's even kind of a dirty word that we need to develop, which is salesmanship, which is if you're going into senior meetings and you're going to try and plug your insights, you've got to do some kind of a sales job on your colleagues and on that audience to win them over. The data does not speak for itself, ever. This is like a whole fallacy that this work is so good it speaks for itself. It never does. There's got to be a cheerleading squad. There's got to be a salesperson. There's got to be everybody that you need before you get into that meeting and in that meeting for work to carry through the business. So for me, they are really skills we need to develop, because our metrics should not be dashboards delivered and reports delivered. It should be decisions made, opinions changed, investment gained, investment moved, sales increased. They should be the things that we hold ourselves responsible for alongside our colleagues. So I think, as I said, there's education on both sides. It's developing those skills in our own teams. But I really strongly feel that it's also getting business to understand just what insight can bring, so that we're not trying to break down doors. They're already at least partially open when we go in.
Yeah, really like that, James. Thank you. Namita, how does that chime with you?
I think agree with a lot of what James said. I think there's so much in what he said, which sort of resonates across organizations and across the industry. I think the key word for me, and I'm just adding to, I think, a couple of points that James made. It's about, the key word here is future. And, to that we think maybe in terms of where are we today and what do we need to move towards. So, for example, today, there is still this perception that we're defined by tools and methodology. But as James said, tomorrow it's about decision impact. It's a whole new different set of skills. Can we influence? Can we, show bravery in our recommendations? Can we have brevity? Can we have storytelling? And can we have integration? So it's a whole different way of telling that story. So that's maybe the first part. The other part is, the way research actually is evolving, because to me, it's about going from a very project-based mindset to an always-on ecosystem as a mindset. because of the kind of information that's available today. A lot of it tends to be, always on. It's a stream and it's always coming at you. So in that sense, is that it's about moving from a static to a very, dynamic, always on stream. And can you handle and design these ecosystems is one set of skills. We were always consumer obsessed, right? But I think in addition to being consumer obsessed, with LLMs coming in, we need to also understand machine psychology. And what does that mean? Do we understand how agentic, what the agentic shopper is actually is being guided by? And therefore, from what I would argue is a very narrow domain expertise that most of us have sort of grown up with, I think it needs to have a completely different set of skills and a lot more integrative thinking in the way that we, design careers and talent for the future. And last but not the least, I just want to say that there is an emotional component to it. It's not just about having the skills. It's also about, are you able to deal with that level of volatility? Are you able and equipped to deal with the kind of constant flow of information that's coming to you and that's constantly changing? There is an emotional and I think an aptitudinal component to it in terms of, do you have those strategies? But I have to say that, I think the world of insights is going to be a lot more exciting. And because of all these reasons, and because they're able to move away from the things that, traditionally also held a lot of people back. So that's kind of my take on it.
Absolutely. Thank you, Namita. I find that notion of, like you say, the emotional capability fascinating, and that we've been talking a lot around resilience as well internally, have been able to cope with this ambiguity as well, and the fast moving nature of where we're going, and that sort of slight sense of uncertainty and maybe not quite as in control as we once were. JT, I'm going to hand over to you to see if you have any other comments to add to this. And in particular, is there anything more that the industry can be doing to cultivate that next generation?
Well, firstly, I think spooky timing. I've been talking about agentic shoppers earlier today, Namita. So go look that up if you're listening in and haven't heard of it before. I actually think there's going to be a doubling down on methodology. I think that we're going to need deep expertise in some of the things that we know and love in the industry, as well as the skills that we've been hearing about here, which I would expect a client organization to focus on a little bit more. The storytelling, the dealing with the data deluge, how to help people make decisions. As James talked about, the almost like the PR and the selling of insights into stakeholders, etc. That's a definite thing we've seen. But when it goes wrong, how do you understand which part of the machine has broken? And so there's also deep technological expertise required in the suppliers in these data ecosystems. They are, as Namita says, becoming more always on. I see less project work, much more always on tracking, always on data streams, much more integration inside clients, ingesting data, buying it as a currency, buying it once and using it many, one truth, all that good stuff. So and there's lots of public stuff about Unilever's work there. So there's, I think, a lot of training in disciplines that perhaps we've not looked at before. We've seen data science rise. I like decision scientist. There's lots of different ways we can shape this, but I think what we're all saying is it's a real opportunity for a revolution and a rapid evolution of what we've been doing for a while. And I think this is an accelerant for us all. And yeah, I think overall very positive.
Great. Thank you, JT. Okay, to the final theme, if you like, that we heard really strongly from Riva at the end there, that unity and collaboration across the industry are essential for building on this growth that we're seeing over the last 10 years and shaping what's to come with confidence. So JT, I know from speaking with you briefly earlier on this week that you feel quite strongly about this theme. So I'm going to come to you first. So how can research buyers and providers work in partnership to speak the same language and share the same vision and foster those new forms of collaboration and really just ensure that as a sector we continue to thrive and grow?
A mixture of softer things, and harder things. In the softer side of stuff, I think agreeing nomenclature, methodological definitions, etc., which comes from, of course, standards and training, so we know what we're talking about. My experience of selling to large organizations is that we're perhaps as an industry a bit behind other parts of the marketing and other disciplines that buy. As an example, I think post-COVID, we saw a dramatic shift in how marketing budgets and insight budgets that sit underneath them were distributed, a bit of a level reset, and some businesses have not recovered from that change, and we're seeing a more for less trend a lot that's passed on to suppliers, and those who've not innovated just frankly don't get in now. But what have noticed more recently is that we're seeing evidence required of how you're moving from, for example, using AI and automation for efficiencies, so make it faster, make it a bit cheaper, the better is perhaps not quite so important, make it the same, to an AI for effectiveness. So that's kind of table stakes. You'll do all those things now. Procurement saying, well, you've baked all that in, you've got the value. What are you going to give us on top? What's the analytical advantage or the value add that you're going to deliver as part of the deal? As we change from AI being too scary to being, okay, we're all a bit more comfortable with this now. What are we going to do together on it? And there's some very interesting conversations around supplier client partnerships. How do we get a first mover advantage with data moving and models moving into businesses? How does our role work? So just really interesting changes in what's being bought. Just want to raise that as a point. Maybe James and Namita have a perspective.
Mm-hmm. Do one of you want to take that?
Yeah, so think about this, the kind of partners, buyers and providers. I got a slightly different angle on it, I think, which is I feel like that relationship has just become too transactional. And that when I look at relationships with a lot of vendors over the past few years, there's been a real lack of partnership and business understanding, and I think that's declined more and more over the year. And I think part of that is the price pressures. It's some of the changes that JT said. There's lots of reasons for it, but getting into these kind of transactional, passing data, passing slides type relationships will not get us through this significant hurdle of how AI is going to change anything. So my real ask in this area to vendors and partners and agencies is to lean in. It is to partner, but it's also to share some responsibility. And what I mean by that is my team in our current role, we take real responsibility for the impact of our work to the degree that we tie ourselves to some of the business objectives of the company, and we measure ourselves and our impact against those objectives. And that shows that as an insights function, we're not on the sidelines throwing numbers over the fence and allowing the business to use them. We're taking ownership and sharing the responsibility with marketing colleagues and other colleagues of what happens when things get done and not done based on recommendations. And my expectation and hope is that we get a bit more of that through the value chain rather than having quite a two-sided industry.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I've been on both sides, and I think, Gemma, you said it in my intro, I've been on both sides of this, and I've seen the good and the bad of very close relationships and very transactional relationships, and sometimes both have their place. But for me, if we want to really drive impact, and if we want to drive this transition in the role of it not just being about the data, but about the value that we deliver, something has to change here. And something really needs to be about skin in the game, responsibility, and driving impact together.
And could that be around different commercial models, do you think, James, when it comes to working?
I mean, it can be around different commercial models, but it can also be around, repeat business and understanding of the business, leading to greater opportunities. The one partner at the moment who is very, very embedded into my business picks up opportunities. And you pick up opportunities because let's go all Byron Sharp. You've increased your market size by not just trying to pitch to the insights team, but by showing your business understanding. All of a sudden, the creative team want to talk to you. All of a sudden, the business, as a vendor, as a supplier, as an agency, you're increasing the size of your potential business. And I'd really see it from that point of view. It wouldn't come down to remuneration based on performance. It would come down to there's more in it for you, the more that you lean in.
Yeah. Great. Thank you. Namita, did you want the final word on this one?
Yeah, maybe just to add a couple of angles from my perspective. I think the simplest thing is also the toughest, which is, just spending a little bit more time together as we want to move from transaction to, a partnership model. There is no substitute for context. There is no substitute for conversation. There's no substitute for co-ideation. And I think, it is also the toughest thing that folks on both sides find extremely difficult to do. So I think there needs to be again, I come to the word intentionality in terms of, yes, we need to drive this integrated developmental agenda, and there needs to be some intentionality about the relationship. Are you in transaction mode? Are you being in, are you really looking to grow that partnership? Do you want to lean in? And all of those things that were mentioned by James. So from my perspective, for example, one of the richest sources of value add is the fact that people have, subject matter experts. Agencies have fantastic subject matter expertise. And therefore, there is this chance of actually getting a talent development agenda going from both sides, where you're actually actively encouraging perspectives from different sides. So that's maybe one thing that is a little bit under leveraged today. And the third thing is, at a very human level, the one thing that we all have as researchers is intellectual curiosity. This is what defines us. This is why we're in the business that we're in. Right. So I, for example, have these random but very interesting questions, which I keep sending out to people who are like-minded, which I call the blue kind of questions because I categorize them in blue in my Outlook. And it's just, sometimes it does have to do with the business, but a lot of times it's to do with, hey, what do you think of this? Or what's your take on this theme? And I think it's really about, if we can't spend that time together physically, let's at least, think together on some of these questions. And then, what naturally happens is you kind of try to then have engagement on both sides of, the project, as I would call it, going to sometimes the business outcome. What have you learned? Is there a challenge on this brief? Can you, be a little bit more provocative and question me a little bit more? So I think it's that kind of a conversation, and that naturally, organically leads to opportunities sometimes. But I think it's a very rich part of what we do, but it's a little bit under-leveraged at the moment for a variety of reasons.
Thank you. We've got a couple of minutes now to open up to questions. I'm just looking at the Q&A, and we've got a couple in there. And to be honest, I think we've probably covered quite a few of them, but let me just try and pick out and see if there's anything from the panel that you have additional to add. So I guess this next question kind of leads on from that discussion we've just been having. So as the insight expert of the future evolves, what new capabilities will both clients and suppliers need to stay most credible and differentiated in the market? JT, I'm going to hand that one to you, if that's okay.
Nice. That's nice to see the question. Well, I mean, I think at the very least, we're all going to have to be one step ahead of the average business person and who's understanding AI, right? Because it covers everything we do, and that's going to be a real challenge. A challenge to us. I think some of us in the industry perhaps rest on deep expertise of a specific discipline and don't need to evolve too much to stay expert. I think that's going to really change. So, staying ahead of the curve on AI particularly. And not being afraid to change. That's my first answer. I'm conscious of the time we have.
No. That's good. Thank you. Anything from you, James, Namita, around what new capabilities will both clients and suppliers need to stay credible and differentiated?
I think for me, it is commercial obsession. You need to know what is your decision impact? What's the size of the market that you're working with? What is the monetary value of what you've guided? So I think there needs to be a consumer obsession, but also a commercial obsession.
James, anything to add?
What Namita said, business understanding, like get out of your silo, get out of your rabbit hole, understand the broader business, and then you can see where you can add impact. Yeah. And be where the business needs you, not where you want to be.
Yeah. Thank you. That's very clear.
I just summarize that, if I may. Sorry, that it's skills, but it's behaviors.
Yep.
These things we can teach new stuff. We're capable, but it's the it is about transformation. It is about keeping up with what the business is doing, and that can be a challenge for specialists.
Thank you. Just another question that's popped up. How can the industry create shared expectations around transparency and accountability so clients feel confident in AI-enabled outputs and suppliers can innovate responsibly? Who wants to take that one?
I mean, for me, this starts with the point of leaning in, and it starts also with some of the work the MRS is doing already here, which is to say, if we can't pretend this isn't happening, the best thing we can do is lean in and explain and understand the role AI is playing. Businesses are nervous because it is a sea of grey out there. And if you're sitting anywhere in a senior role in the business, you don't want to be in those areas with any data issues or AI issues. So I think we just need to be more visible, more transparent, and more deliberate with our conversations around AI instead of kind of continuing on our same train tracks and almost pretending it's not happened till it gets to be so big that we need to look at it. So it goes back to my first discussion about the ostriches, with their heads in the sand. I really think if we want to give confidence to the business in these areas, we have to also show and exude confidence and understanding ourselves. And so we need to upskill ourselves. That quote that you showed, Gemma, in there, it's not AI that will take your job, but it might well be someone who does AI better than you do. So really embrace that, understand it, and become one of the go-to people to talk about the role AI can and cannot play in our area and give confidence to others.
Thank you. I just want to jump in with one other question whilst we still have time, and I think we'll pass this one over to Namita, because I think it's relevant to what you've done within Unilever. On the commercial obsession point and proving value, are there any ideas on how we prove the commercial value of insight? And is this an area where the MRS could help? I'm not saying you have to answer the final part, but is there any ideas on how we prove that commercial value of insight?
Yeah, so I think every decision that you start thinking about is a business question. Okay, I am kind of market making for a certain product, or I am recommending this innovation be launched. There is a fundamental commercial logic that underlies that decision. You are working with a certain size of market, you're working with a certain consumer franchise, you're working with a certain impact in terms of price premiumization. There is always a commercial objective to what we are setting off to do. And I think the first bit is about understanding what that commercial objective is. And once you know what the objective is, then this is in our wheelhouse. We are experts at finding ways to measure the value of what we do. So I think but it does start with an appreciation, which is fundamentally what is the business decision we are trying to influence, understanding the structure of the business, and then getting into what are the right metrics and what could that mean in terms of monetary value.
Thank you, Namita. I think probably one of my key takeouts from this discussion is very much around that commercial impact and how we do lean in. I think that's something also that you've all mentioned to our clients, to if we're client side within the wider business, to really understand and take personal responsibility for that commercial impact. And I think that is an opportunity for us to lead through this era of change and disruption that we're going through at the moment, because there's no doubt about it, AI is fundamentally reshaping the landscape, and it's bringing that speed and that scale that simply weren't possible before. But we know that AI can't replace what we all do and the people within this sector, but it very much enhances, and I think you mentioned it, Namita, augments them. And so that real value still lies, that inherent value still lies in our human judgment, our commerciality, our creativity. But there is more that we can do there. And I think it's a personal accountability on us all individually, but then also as an industry to really to realise that in order for us to continue to grow. So we're at time. I want to thank our panellists and also just take a moment to acknowledge the teams both at PA, Rob and Riva, and the MRS, who have put so much time and thought and expertise, deep expertise in their craft into this report, and I think it really does acknowledge how much as a sector we do contribute, not only to businesses but to public services, to policy, to innovation, and really to society at large. So, you know, let's celebrate that power of evidence, of human ingenuity, and continue to work together to make sure that we shape the future of our industry with confidence. So thank you all for joining.
Thank you.
Thanks, you.
Guys.